side, we've also got the Royal Navy Wildcat of the Black Cats team running towards the western end of the flight line. That's going to be going off to hold. The MiG-15, the first of the two jets to roll. The aircraft leading this formation, the MiG-15, a design that made a great deal of use of captured wartime German technology. It first flew in December 1947, and there was a great deal of British influence in the engine, because while the Soviets had access to German jet engine technology from the war, the Rolls-Royce Nene was seen as being a better bet, and to the surprise of many, the Soviets were able to obtain a license from the British government. So that engine went on to be produced in the Soviet Union as the Klimov RD-45, which the Soviets later improved as the VK-1. And when it came to the Korean War of 1950 to 53, these attributes proved very useful when the aircraft came up against its most famous adversary, the US Air Force's North American F-86 Sabre. Ask, is this MiG-15 in American markings? Those are the early post-war US Air Force. Well, this also dates from the Korean War period. It represents a MiG-15 bis model from the North Koreans that fell into US Air Force hands. It happened on the 21st of September 1953 when Senior Lieutenant No Kum-sok of the Korean People's Army Air Force took off from his base at Sunan near the North Korean capital, Pyongyang. He was heading for Kimpo Air Base in South Korea. The aircraft went undetected. He duly landed at Kimpo and defected to the west. It all happened after the Americans launched what they called Operation Moolah, offering $100,000 to the first pilot to defect to South Korea with a MiG-15 bis. It wasn't the first such aircraft that fallen into a Air Force pilot had defected in March 1953, landing on the Baltic island of Bornholm. The Americans decided to retain the MiG to evaluate it. It was transported to Kadena Air Base on the Japanese island of Okinawa in a C-124 Globemaster transport. It was flown by various pilots, including Major Chuck Yeager. They noted its strengths and weaknesses over the F-86 Sabre. The Sabre had the edge at lower level, and of course, American pilots had proved rather more experienced in the Korean War combats, not least due to their Second World War experiences. However, the MiG-15 was seen to have a better climb rate than its adversary. Some of those evaluations took place at Mikoyan Air Force Base in Florida, but it was back at Wright-Patterson in 1956 that the aeroplane met a rather undignified end to its flying career when it was in the hands of an RAF pilot who'd been sent over to evaluate it, Flight Lieutenant Ernest Chandler. He had a landing mishap, the undercarriage partially collapsed, and the MiG's flying career was at an end. However, that airframe, the one that's represented by this aircraft's colour scheme today, was repaired to static display standard, and you can see it today in the National Museum of the US Air Force and RAF Celle. And so it's a really interesting and rather imaginative scheme to have put this aircraft into, and it's certainly raised a lot of eyebrows from people who might not understand why a MiG-15 is in American colours. Packed Air Forces and many aligned with the Vampire. One of the prettiest of all British combat aircraft designs, the Vampire. It was initially known, you can see why, as the Spider Crab before the name was changed. This twin boom layout, incidentally, with these twin tail booms, was chosen so that they could make the jet pipe shorter and minimise the loss of thrust from the single engine. That was a power plant developed by Frank Halford, who for many years had been de Havilland's engine man, as the Halford H1, before it became known as the de Havilland Vampire. And it's an aircraft of very interesting construction. De Havilland had a great deal of experience of building wooden aircraft. The Mosquito, of course, springs most famously to mind, and the structure of the Vampire is a mixture of wood and metal. The fuselage pod has a balsa wood core with layers of birch veneer inside and outside. The wings, the tail booms, and the tail, by contrast, are all metal. The early Vampires were solely used as day fighters. They were too late to see wartime service, entering service in Mark I form in 1945, but they achieved a lot of notable feats. The first carrier landing and takeoff by a jet were made by the legendary Captain Eric Winkle Brown in a Vampire aboard HMS Ocean in December 1945. They were the first jets of all to cross the Atlantic on an American tour by Vampires from number 54 Squadron in July 1948, and the RAF's first jet aerobatic team was formed on Vampires that same year by, once again, number 54 Squadron. This is all over the world with the RAF. They were used as fighter bombers, they were night fighter variants. The Vampire T-11 trainer was extremely popular and used for many years by the RAF.